What did your parents/family do that you later realized was insane? My mom once blew out the pilot lights on our gas stove, cranked up the gas, and told 7Y/O me and my 14Y/O sister to go to sleep. I went to bed, not knowing any better. Luckily, my sister dragged me out of the house, and we sat in the car. Mom finally changed her mind, sobered up a bit, aired out the house, relit the pilots, and took us back inside. That was fun. My mom was always very invested in our romantic lives, partly because that was an area where we didn't stack up well as compared to our cousins. The most insane manifestation of this was when I agreed to go out on a date with a guy, only to find out before the date that he was a sexual predator who'd been fired/arrested after he preyed on 4 separate freshmen at the school where he taught. Mom flipped out trying to convince me not to cancel the date. He might have grown out of it. You don't know if you don't give him a chance. Thankfully, my dad was on my side and I cancelled the date. But mom sulked the entire rest of the night and demanded I log her into my Facebook account so she could scroll through my friends list so that she could see which of my male friends were straight and single so that she could push me towards them instead. Let homeless punk rockers live with us. Several, and some of them slept in our beds with us, with her permission. Two of my sisters were teen moms. My grandpa would pick up my mom and aunt from elementary school and race the train every time. My mom scared shootless and my aunt cheering him on to go faster. No restrictions on food or drinks. From the time I was 4 or 5 I was drinking around 5 cans of Drive Pepper a day. My parents never told me I needed to drink water and real juice was never in the house. Juice when I was little was Hawaiian Punch or the 5% juice Minute Maid fruit punch. Lunches during the summer was a continuous cycle of pizza rolls, SpaghettiOs and McDonald's. Breakfast was either chocolate Pop-Tarts or Fruity Pebbles cereal. I don't think junk food now and then is too much, but I don't think I had a single day in my childhood where I wasn't given sweets, fatty snacks and caffeine. The funny thing is, as a kid I used to think it was my friends' parents who were the odd, mean ones for only letting their kids have things like sodas on rare occasions. Looking back I speculate that along with just being lazy parenting, it was also probably my parents' way of trying to make me happy and make up for the lack of time spent with me by buying me whatever junk food I wanted. My brother while raising his boys would buy like 10 gallons of milk at a time when it was on sale and then put it in the deep freezer. It never tasted like milk after it thawed. He claimed to not have noticed a difference. Oh, there's a difference, alright. Edit. I had no idea that this gross taste would be eliminated or rectified, I guess, by shaking the milk. Man, I bet my nephews wish they would have known that, lol. We lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere, at least 35 minutes to the nearest grocery store. I'm not sure how it started because I was a kid, but anytime our puppy dog howled, we would all howl. To the point that it was a deafening sound and would kind of make your ears rattle. His name was Duke. I would occasionally howl first because then he would follow, and then so would my mother, father, and 2 older brothers. I thought it was awesome, and it felt invigorating to do. I now realize this is odd. My parents visited underground Atlanta back in the early 90s. Not the safest place. Anyways, my brother was a baby and crawled under a bench they were sitting on. He pulled out an umbrella bag with a very sinister knife inside. My parents don't report the knife or anything, but instead keep it, and it becomes a staple knife in our kitchen, so yay. Pretty sure my parents used a murder weapon to cut the crust off our PB&Js. My dad fell victim to many money scams in the early 2000s. He would always say he's sitting on a gold mine, and I thought we were gonna be rich. Yeah, right, don't think he's learned his lesson. I still catch him replying to bullshit emails. My alcoholic bipolar father would drop me and my 2 siblings off at the grocery store with his credit card and told us to go grocery shopping. We were young kids when this started. He'd either go hit up a bar or wait in the parking lot before coming back to get us. Sometimes it would be a long wait. Looking back, I still don't know how we were able to run his credit card and no one ever batted an eye. We had to cook too, so it wasn't exactly healthy stuff. A lot of times the food would all be gone a week or so before he'd take us back to the store. We had to get really creative. We'd joke that there was nothing left but the goo in the back of the refrigerator. Honestly surprised we didn't develop diabetes, although I'm hypoglycemic or obesity or anything serious. We quickly learned not to buy a bunch of candy or sweets, something that kind of impressed me looking back. I learned to keep an emergency stash of food hidden in my room. One of many insane things, but first that came to mind. On the day my dad decided to buy our family's first PC, he loaded me and my younger sisters into the back of our little 2-door Honda and drove the 20 minutes to the store. After purchasing the computer, my dad realized there wasn't enough room in our tiny car for 3 children, car seats, and the giant-ass 1997 computer. So he left us at the store, apparently thinking that if he bought us all candy bars, that'd be enough to keep a 5, 3, and 2-year-old occupied and out of trouble. He took the new computer home and then turned around to come back and get us, having left us alone for easily 40 minutes. Edit. This was archive//images. Summit Media Digital. com/top/images/2017/02/17/ Civic FB. JPG. Pretty tiny. Also, my mom found out about all of this a year ago when my dad casually told the story over dinner. My mom is very controlling. She would make me turn my diary over to make sure I wasn't writing anything she didn't approve of. So I saved up enough money by skipping school lunch and bought a secret diary at the book fair. I came home to her sitting on my bed and yelled at me for writing "Mom is a jerk" or something like that. She would have grounded me, but I wasn't allowed out of the house without her escorting me until age 16. She then wondered why I had no friends. I was allowed only 30 minutes on the computer in the computer room, and I would have to record which websites I went on and what usernames and passwords I used. She would use the password book to go on the websites and look at who I was talking to. I also just kind of accepted that it was normal for parents to charge rent when you turned 18 and only allow you to eat one meal a day dinner and have to pay for the others yourself. Edit. The rent thing doesn't bother me as much. It started out at $500 a month and went up every year, so now I'm at $700 a month. That's pretty normal rent around where I live, and I don't have to pay for heat/electricity/internet. I'm trying to move out, but I also have to pay for college out of pocket, and it adds up. I was 7 and my brother was 5 during the early 80s. We were told to wait in the school parking lot for the babysitter to pick us up. Thing is, we never met her before and had no idea what she looked like. So we waited until a woman pulled up with a picture of us in her hand. She showed us the picture and asked if it was us. We said it was, and she told us she's our babysitter. We got in the car without thinking twice. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Get into a screaming argument where they ended up throwing dishes at each other's heads fairly frequently. Wow, they're really mad right now. Better play some Nintendo until this blows over. It wasn't until way later in life that my sister and I said, wait a second. WTF. When we were young, my father smoked a lot, and when we were with him during the day and said we were hungry, he'd give us each a pack of matches. We'd eat them and then be good. No, we weren't poor, just had lazy/crazy parents. I used to babysit my parents' friends' kids occasionally. After I babysit 2 kids that were 4 and 6, my mom said her friend was happy and I did a good job. I was 3, then she mentioned that was good because her friend was distrustful of babysitters since her other 2 kids had drowned while under a babysitter supervision. Thought that was slightly odd. No helicoptering in the 80s. My mother used to barge into my room every single morning because she heard me talking to someone. She would creep up to my door and throw it up. She did this for weeks while I was in high school. Fend for yourself night when I was like 5 and on. We'd have to find our own food that night. I later found out my parents were too lazy to cook for my sister and I, who were just 5 and 8. I used to come up with really weird food combinations. Most notably Nutella or peanut butter plus candy sprinkles wrapped up in a tortilla. As I got older I began toasting it and rolling it in cinnamon sugar. Edit. Wow. People are either going same dude or Jesus Christ, how could a parent do something like this to a 5? Why? Oh. I feel a little better knowing there's so many of us said it. To clarify, this happening once a week or something isn't an issue. With me it gradually went from like twice a week to every other day. Eventually growing up my parents just stopped cooking, and if they did it was suddenly a huge deal. Like they'd cook once a week at best. Really chaotic stuff. I became the best improv chef ever, so I'm thankful. But at the same time Jesus Christ my sister became a pre-diabetic at 12 over the lack of nutrition. We didn't know any better unfortunately. One of the winter chores was to clear old trees in an area that eventually became fields. Imagine being hoisted up to a knot on top of a tree, 30 feet in the air on the front end loader of a tractor, so you could dump in a mixture of oil and gas, and chucking matching in the hole. The explosion being enough to rock the loader back and forth. My father ran the tractor, while I firebombed the tree. When those trees did come down we'd haul them with the tractor. While chained up I would ride the outer branches to where we're hauling these old growth cottonwood trees that were massive and sometimes tipped. More than once I got caught up under these trees as they rolled, but luckily never got more than a few scrapes. My mother refused to take me to the emergency room growing up. She took my stepdad and my stepsister, but refused to take me. Had permanent damage to my ankle thanks to her refusing to take me there. Thanks mum. I live in UK for reference, so it wasn't like we couldn't afford it. Throughout my childhood I would end up being my dad's therapist. He'd often tell me he sometimes wished he would go to sleep and never wake up. A bit heavy for a 12-year-old to hear from their parent I guess. After I became a teen and could drive, he'd call me in the middle of the night while I was at my mom's house and ask me to rush over because he was sick and needed help. I spent a lot of nights feeding him jello and sitting awake in his room so he could sleep because his medication would make him hallucinate and think demons were going to kill him in his sleep. It wasn't until I was older I realized I missed a lot of my childhood because I had to parent him instead of the other way around. Eventually he found a wife who takes care of him and cut me out of his life. Apparently he tells her stories about how I never spent time with him and never cared because she sends me rants about how awful I am. Mine's pretty simple. We didn't have money for food when I was a kid. Mom was too embarrassed to apply for food stamps, so we went without. But my parents had no issues buying food only for themselves and refusing to let us have any, including hiding them on high shelves so we couldn't sneak into it. They would eat in front of my sister and I while we sat and stared. They'd get mad and give us each a bite and make us go to our rooms. There would be nothing else in the house to eat, and it didn't matter. As a kid, it sucked, but your parents know what they are doing, right? As an adult, and a parent myself, it's batshit crazy. I could never sit there and eat while my son went hungry. It came out later that my mom was an addict, narcotics, and booze. And my dad was more interested in banging any girl who'd have him, including my 16-year-old best friend in HS, than raising any. So yeah, they aren't a part of my life anymore. My in-laws, well mostly my now deceased Melinda brother-in-law swear by trunk food. What is trunk food? It is food that you make and sometimes cook sometimes not, and when you go on a road trip, you wrap it up in foil and throw it in the trunk with the spare tire and everything else gross back there. This is only done for long distance trips. When you arrive at your destination, you eat the food. Millen brother-in-law swore that it makes the food taste better. If the food was uncooked, the idea was that being in a hot trunk for several hours would cook it to the desired temperature in theory. The cakes were probably the safest. She would make small individual spice cake loaves and wrap them up, and then you'd have spice cake with the gentle aroma of car exhaust. She once made an entire birthday cake for me in the same way, except that it was left in the pan and had icing and minimal wrapping. I ate a slice to be polite, but I was being very polite. I didn't eat the rest. Brother-in-law is the worst though. He is Orthodox Jewish and keeps kosher, which is problematic when traveling long distances, so has used to having to pack food with him. They used to live in South Carolina, and he was driving to Miami to catch a flight to Israel a few times before he actually emigrated there. We live in Central Florida and offered to prepare him some kosher food, but he wasn't having it and brought his own meatloaf out of the trunk of a very hot car on a hot summer day. He wanted to share it with us, but I have this thing about food poisoning, so I didn't eat it. You can only be so polite. Mel has since passed away, and brother-in-law now lives in Israel, so no more trunk food. My husband, the twin of brother-in-law, has working brain cells and believes strongly in food safety. Thank goodness. My parents were very poor when I was growing up. Affording a babysitter or any other kind of childcare for that matter was completely out of the question. My mom worked days and my dad worked nights, so most of the time there was at least one parent home, even if they were sleeping somewhere. On the rare occasions when neither parent was home or had to go get something they couldn't or didn't want to lug us around for, we were left in the house alone to our own devices. This started happening when I was around 4, so at 4 years old I was left alone with my first sister, who was literally a baby. Then at 6 with one sister that was a toddler, while the other was literally a baby. It's horrifying to think about what could have happened on those rare days, since, even with a chair, the phone and all locks were out of my reach. I had a similar experience growing up. My mom usually wasn't around, and my dad was in and out of jail when I was little. So I was left with my grandparents. My grandma worked from 6 AM to well past midnight. My grandfather was disabled, he broke his back and could walk short distance and drive, but had fairly limited movement and slept most of the day unless taking me out to eat. Even when awake, he'd always lock himself in his room and watch TV. At 4, my newborn sister and I were often left alone for hours. I learned to make bottles to feed my sister. I changed her diapers as best I could and would rock her to sleep if she fussed. I mostly just ate dry cereal and watched cartoons on Boomerang all day. I'm honestly surprised both of us survived childhood. My siblings are a lot older than me, so they were out of the house when I turned 8. Both my parents worked, so I would come home to an empty house and make my own dinner. That alone is sort of odd, but when I was 14, my dad got downsized and started driving a semi. My mom got licensed too. They were driving from coast to coast in the US, leaving a 14-year-old alone for about 3 weeks a month. It's amazing that I never destroyed the house and that I actually went to school. 4 years I couldn't figure out how my parents always knew what I was doing. Sneaking a Boeing GF, bringing in a bottle of vodka, getting in late after curfew, you name it. I chalked it up to them being parents. I was 21 when I found 4 surveillance monitors in the canning closet downstairs. My family were all Jehovah's Witnesses, so there is a number of things I didn't realize weren't normal until much later in life. My grandparents in Italy would burn tons of marijuana plants because it was unknown to them and like an unwanted weed on their farms. I mean, they would never had done anything with it anyways, even if they did know, but still. They burned lots of weed. Once was told not to wear a seatbelt because too much stuff was in the car. Blackberries were below me. Dad slammed on the brakes. I landed my ass in blackberries. I walk inside a mall to clean up. Mom tries to clean my ass in front of a food court bunch of people. I make her stop and go into a bathroom to clean blackberries off my ass. Screamed and raged at me as a way to keep me from having angry outbursts at home and at school. Real freaking smart, Dad. My mom had us each pick out a pebble to put in our shoe each morning. We were told to offer up our suffering for the poor souls in purgatory. Cut to grade 3, gym class. Mrs. Grabowski, our gym teacher, Harris INP, why are you limping? There's a pebble in my shoe. So take it out. But what about the poor souls in purgatory? She didn't say another word about it. I quit with the pebbles a few years later, but it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized how screwed up the whole situation was. Picked me up at the hospital after hip surgery. I was born with a dislocated hip. Had a lot of surgeries as a kid. They were kinda no biggie to me at that point, and had to make a detour to check out an antique clock he was thinking of buying. Left me out in the van in a body cast in the middle of a Wisconsin winter for 20 minutes or so while he haggled. Class to be cold. When I was very young, maybe 5 or 6, my mother would cuddle with my younger brother and I. She thought it was funny when she pretended to die while holding us. I was terrified, and I will always remember that. She would wake up from death and laugh to get a reaction out of us. That is my earliest fricked up memory of her. Got home from being bullied for being fat. Told my mum, asked her for advice. She advised me that I was just ugly and to deal with it. I had an eating disorder 4 years from this. Still relapse a lot. Self-harm, low self-esteem. We moved every time I made a friend at school. Eventually got into full-on brawls and fights at school. She got called to the school, and even when the other kid or parent would admit they started it or apologized, she wouldn't accept that it wasn't my fault. Everything was my fault. RIP you sodding chain smoking cunt.